Let me share a story about the time my mother and I discovered a homeless man living in our cottage basement. This was in February of this year, 2021. We have a cottage about 45 minutes away from my parents' main home. It's not too far from Huntsville, Muskoka, Ontario, if anyone wants a visual. Thing is, it's completely unfinished. The basement has no proper flooring and has a slight water leak right now, so there are plenty of fans and a dehumidifier running. As a result, one of us needs to check on the place at least once every 2 to 3 weeks to empty the dehumidifier in the basement and make sure everything is okay. To describe the house layout a bit, the entrance to the basement is directly in front of the main entrance. It's a long, skinny staircase with a low roof, so you need to crouch on the way down. There is one crappy light bulb in the ceiling, so it's always super dark down there. There's one big room, then 2 hallways branching off. One hallway leads to a bedroom, and the other leads to not only a second bedroom, but also a washroom, all of which are completely unfinished and without lighting. The second hallway is much longer, and the rooms are just way off in the back corner of the basement and are completely dark. In other words, it's creepy looking. Okay, so let's get to the good part. The day it all went down. My mom and I are headed up there to empty the dehumidifier, have some lunch, and clean out some junk. We're slowly gutting the place. It had been nearly 3 weeks since we checked up on the place by this point. We stop at a McDonald's beforehand and each got a filet-of-fish combo. First time trying one, and it was actually pretty tasty. We get into the place and put our food on the table, then turn the heat on. The first thing we do is run downstairs to turn the water on and check the dehumidifier. After turning on the water, we head over to the dehumidifier and notice that there is hardly any water in it. It looks like it's only been running for a couple of days. There is still the regular amount of moisture on the ground, but it was strangely empty. My mom and I head upstairs and she grabs her phone to text my dad and asks if he had stopped by to empty the dehumidifier recently. He said he hadn't. We were both puzzled as to why it looked so empty, but never considered there was a third person in the house with us. After heating up our food, we both sit down at the table and turn on the TV. About 5 minutes into our meal, we hear a massive bang downstairs. Almost as if someone stubbed their toe really badly on a cupboard or something like that. We instantly jump and look at one another with a freaked out look on our faces. The TV is still playing rather quietly. Then we hear the worst thing. We hear a small grunt downstairs. It was unmistakable, a human vocal sound. My mom whispers to me, "Was that a person?" And I smirk and nod my head, yes. Although it was freaky at the moment, I wasn't really taking it very seriously for some reason. Looking back, this was pretty serious and this person could have been very dangerous. I just told her, "Grab your jacket and let's head out to the car and call the police." We gather our stuff and I grab a kitchen knife on the way. If you'll recall, the entrance to the basement is directly across from the main entrance to the house. So, I had to make this peek around the corner and was fully expecting to see a person on the dark staircase, but luckily, it was just a series of stairs down into the dark abyss. Once we're out front, we jump in my car and she calls the cops immediately. Within 3 minutes, 4 cruisers show up and 5 cops get out. We told them what had happened and they headed down the driveway. They were in the house for probably 10 minutes before the door opened. A couple of cops walked out and boom, the third cop brought out a short, chubby guy with long black hair and pop bottle glasses. They brought him out handcuffed onto the front steps, and another cop had a bag that looked like his belongings. We were in our car, which was up the street a bit and facing away from the entrance of the cottage, but my mom turned away as soon as he was brought up the driveway. She didn't want to get a good look at him as the whole situation was pretty unsettling for her. They loaded him in the back of one of the cruisers and took him away. One cop came over and spoke with my mom for a bit about the situation. Ultimately, my parents had decided not to press charges against the guy when it was all said and done. He was just sleeping on the cold cement ground with a small roll-out mattress, even though there was a proper bed upstairs. This made us think that he'd been down that back hallway in the unfinished bedroom for a while. We probably walked downstairs to empty the dehumidifier and turn on/off the hot water a number of times, and he was like 15 feet away in one of the bedrooms. He probably wasn't a bad person, and I'm personally, at least a little bit, thankful he decided to empty the dehumidifier. Hopefully, he lived in there for most of the colder months this past winter. We're just lucky it didn't turn into one of those crazy squatting situations.
A little context. My dad and I live together in our own multi-family home in Germany. My dad has a serious lung condition. His lungs produce and trap an excessive amount of mucus. The trapped amount is huge and keeps his lungs from working correctly. It's pretty normal that he has to be picked up by an ambulance every 2 to 3 weeks because he can't breathe anymore. Last week, it was that time of the month. He couldn't breathe. I called an ambulance. He was brought to the closest hospital. Pretty normal for me because this happened at least 10 times in the last 6 months. So I went to bed after he got picked up Tuesday. I went to work the next morning and got a text from him that he has to stay for at least 2 more days, approximately Friday. Wednesday evening, I got home from work and played a match of Rogue Company when someone suddenly rang the doorbell. That's unusual because we never have unannounced visitors. I walked to the door and was about to press the door buzzer to open the main door when I heard, I believe, more than one voice directly in front of my door, so that someone just got past the main door. Weird. I asked, in German, "Hello, who is it?" Silence for 3 seconds. Then, a person who sounds like my father, but at the same time doesn't sound like my father, answers, "Micah, it's me. I forgot my keys. Open the door." I thought, okay, in that case, wait a minute. My dad never calls me Micah, only Michi. And there was that sarcastic tone in that voice. I didn't trust the situation. I called my father on his phone. If the person in front of my door was my father, his phone should ring, right? Right. It didn't. Big whoop. My father answered, and as I suspected, he still was in the hospital. Meanwhile, the 2 persons on the other side of the door heard my phone call and started kicking my door. "Let me in, Micah. It's your daddy. Let me in." Thank God that door is reinforced. After I threatened them with calling police and having a big-ass knife in my hand, they left. I heard their footsteps running down the staircase. I rushed to a window facing the street to check if I can see a car or a license plate. Nothing. Just a few footsteps in the distance. They never came back. What's weird is that they knew my name and that my father wasn't home, despite his car standing in the driveway. Shit was hitting the fan when a buddy reported something similar. We called the police. Investigation in progress.
The story takes place during my senior year of high school, when I still lived at home with my mom. It was a Saturday, so I slept in, as any teenager normally does. And my mom left for work early that morning, so I had spent my day at home all alone. I decided to do some cleaning around the house when I realized we were out of paper towels. So I decided to go down to the garage to get some, since that's usually where we kept extra things. My mom lives in a 3-story townhome where the main floor is on the 2nd floor, and the 1st floor is just a small entryway at the bottom of the stairs and 2 doors. One is the front door, and the other one leads to the garage. So I walked down the stairs and opened the door to the garage, going to flip on the lights but then realizing I didn't need to. The garage door was wide open and letting in a ton of daylight. Maybe to some this wouldn't be a big deal, but my mom lives in a not great part of town and is pretty adamant about closing the garage door when she leaves. I remember feeling really weird about it since it was so unusual, but chalked it up to my mom just not realizing it, or maybe something had rolled under the door so the automatic sensor couldn't completely close, and maybe my mom just drove away without realizing. I then looked over into the dark corner of the garage where the boxes were stacked and the paper towels were stored. For some reason, I couldn't get myself to walk over there and grab them. I do have a slight fear of the dark, so I figured that caused my sudden hesitation. I just stood in the doorway and pressed the garage door button on the wall and watched it close completely. I made sure that nothing blocked it from closing, and I waited a good 10 seconds before leaving to make sure that it was really shut this time. I switched off the light, walked back inside, and then locked the door to the garage. I took maybe about 2 steps up the stairs before I heard boxes tumbling, scuffling of feet, and the audible sound of someone hitting their hand against the garage door opener, and then the mechanical sound of the garage door actually opening. I noped it up the rest of the flight of stairs, then just stood at the top step for probably about 20 minutes, just totally shaking. It wasn't until my mom got home asking me why the garage door was left open that I went back down. Other than my mom's car now in the garage, it's completely empty, except for the boxes in the corner where we typically store extra things for the house. I looked and saw that the boxes were toppled over, and I had to explain the situation to my mom. I'm really glad that my gut told me not to go into the dark corner of the garage. And to whoever decided to creep in there, please just stay away.